Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping into the sun-bleached heart of ancient Persia, where the mountains shimmer in the heat and the deserts stretch endlessly toward the horizon. It's midday in the dusty courtyard of a long-forgotten city, and the air is so dry it feels like your eyelashes might crinkle. You can practically hear the silence, a low hum of heat, a slow creak of clay walls expanding, and the faint buzz of a fly doing its best to not burst into flames. But somewhere behind one of these thick, sand-colored walls, a servant is padding, barefoot across cool tile. He's carrying a silver tray, and on that tray is something chilled, an offering of saffron pudding topped with slivers of frozen rosewater ice. How is that even possible? Well, tonight we're going to find out. You'll see how ancient Persians managed to refrigerate desserts in the desert, without electricity, without fans, and certainly without any help from your local AC repair guy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough to type, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a sunlit Persian courtyard, sweat already prickling at your collar, and it's not even breakfast. You pass a date seller who squints at you like he's trying to decide if you're real or just another heat-induced mirage. A dog is asleep under a cart, tongue out, thoroughly unimpressed by your adventure. It's hard to imagine anyone here would be dreaming of something cold, let alone building entire systems to keep things icy. And yet, here in the heart of the ancient Achaemenid Empire, what we now call Iran, people did exactly that. You cross into the shadow of an old mud brick wall and the air cools by a few blissful degrees. This is your first clue. Persians didn't fight the sun, they worked with it. The secret lay in timing, patience, and architecture more clever than it had any right to be. Historians still argue whether the earliest refrigeration methods were truly Persian innovations or inspired by even older Mesopotamian practices. But what's clear is that by 400 BCE, these desert engineers had a serious handle on the chill. You pause by a small boy selling something wrapped in linen and stuffed into an urn. He grins and pulls out a rough scoop of honeyed ice, flecked with flower petals. You bite into it. It tastes like sugar met snow in a poem. You probably won't survive this, honestly. But how was this even possible? How do you refrigerate a dessert? In a place where daytime temperatures soar past 100 degrees or 38 degrees C for the metric-minded among us? Well, tonight, you're not just sampling ice. You're stepping into a quiet miracle of physics, geometry, and a surprising number of holes in the ground. And it wasn't just for show. These cooling feats fed kings, cooled cities, and preserved foods long before fridges even dreamed of humming. As you stroll through this ancient market, you notice that the cold isn't coming from fans or magic. It's coming from the ground itself. Somewhere nearby, beneath layers of earth, someone stored winter in a jar. You pass a clay building with a dome on top. Not a mosque, not a bathhouse, but something more mysterious. The door is thick and low. A man with strong arms and sand-caked feet is pulling it open, letting out a sigh of air that makes the back of your neck tingle. Cold air. Real cold air. In this heat, it's like a ghost just whispered in your ear. That, dear sleeper, is your first encounter with a yakhchāl. Don't worry, we'll get deeper into those in a moment. But even now, standing here at the edge of that chill breath, you feel something ancient and clever stirring beneath your sandals. And yes, before you ask, there were people who thought this was sorcery. Can you blame them? When the wind outside feels like the inside of a dragon's mouth, and yet there's a bowl of chilled fig paste on your table, you'd call it magic too. The truth, as always, is a little messier and much more beautiful. You walk on, the sun now casting long shadows. Behind every wall, And you start to notice that these Persians weren't simply reacting to their environment. They were planning 3-4 seasons ahead. Winters were for harvesting ice, springs were for preserving it, summers were for celebrating it, and fall. Well, fall was for telling stories about how smart your ancestors were. A few elders sit in the corner of a shaded courtyard, passing around a memory like a piece of fruit. One of them says, "My grandfather used to say the best ice came from the slopes of Mount Damavand." Another replies, "Yes, but only if you packed it with sawdust. Otherwise it sweated itself away." You nod sagely, pretending you understand. Then a cat jumps onto your lap, yawns directly into your soul, and curls up like this is all completely normal. And maybe it was. Because if there's one thing this journey is going to show you, it's that ancient Persia wasn't just a land of conquest and gold, though there was plenty of that. It was a place where silence, sunlight, and science came together in the most delicious of ways. You take one last look around the sleepy street. There's a breeze now, slipping between alleyways like a whispered promise of cooler nights to come. You lean into it. The scent of clay, figs, and jasmine floats past. This isn't just a history lesson. This is an invitation to slow down, listen carefully, and maybe, just maybe, fall asleep before we even hit the first snowball. You step toward the domed structure, this ancient, unassuming vault that locals call a yakhchāl, literally ice pit. It's wider than it first seemed, its exterior coated in a sun-baked layer of clay and lime. You reach out to touch the rough surface. It's warm. But inside, it's like stepping into late autumn while the rest of the world bakes. As you duck through the low entryway, the light dims and the air shifts. It's cooler here, not just a little, but enough to make your arms prickle. The smell is earthy, like wet stone, with a faint sweetness, perhaps from decades of fruit syrups long since gone. You blink, adjusting to the shadows. The domed ceiling curves above like a still, inverted bowl. You run your fingers along the inner walls. There's a slope here, guiding meltwater down toward the base. Clever, always guiding, never wasting. These ice houses weren't just holes in the ground. They were marvels of passive cooling. Historians still argue whether the double-layered insulation was perfected in this region or borrowed from earlier Egyptian designs. But the Persians, ever the engineers, took the concept and ran with it. You shuffle deeper inside, your sandals brushing against packed earth and cold dust. At the very bottom, there's a shallow pool. In winter, this would have been filled with ice harvested from the mountains, then covered in thick layers of straw or sawdust. Straw. As if the secret to preserving cold all summer was the same thing. Goats slept on. You chuckle quietly. It makes just enough sound to echo. It sounds like you're laughing with 100 ghosts. There's a wooden sled here, leaning against the wall, its runners smoothed with use, though it hasn't seen snow in decades. A relic of winter labor. You picture workers dragging chunks of ice from the mountains under the pale January sun, wrapped in wool, their breath turning to steam as they muttered about sore backs and stubborn donkeys. Outside, the temperature might hover around 40 grader. That's 140 for anyone still keeping track. But in here, with walls sometimes 2 meters thick, the cold lingers. Lingers like a memory. Or like the last bite of frozen rosewater melting on your tongue. You glance upward. Above you, the cone-shaped roof has a small opening, just a slit. It's not for light, really. It's a vent, positioned to catch the wind. The bad gear, wind catcher. Another stroke of genius. Even the warm desert wind, when guided properly, could help pull hot air up and out, while denser cool air settled downward. No moving parts, no motors, just physics and prayer. A gentle breeze whispers through the vent now. It brushes past your face, and you inhale. Somewhere up there, the sun is burning, but in this moment, it might as well be 1,000,000 miles away. You. Imagine royalty sitting cross-legged under striped canopies, sampling ice creams long before refrigeration was a word. flavored with pomegranate, mulberry, and dates, each bite a miracle. You're not a royal, but you still lean into the fantasy, letting it melt behind your closed eyes. Back in the dome, the servant with the silver tray reappears. You watch as he gently places a bowl of dessert, gold-flecked and shimmering, on a stone ledge. The dessert wobbles slightly, like it knows it shouldn't exist in this climate. You understand. You shouldn't either, not in a place like this, and yet, here you are, marveling at ancient ingenuity in a space so humble and silent, it feels more like a sanctuary than a storage facility. This is the point where you start to realize ancient Persians weren't obsessed with comfort. They were obsessed with control. Controlling time, temperature, and even the seasons. Winter wasn't just a few cold months. It was a harvest. They'd trap cold like you might trap rainwater or grain, then portion it out carefully through the hotter months. You glance down at the pool again. Still. Dark. Maybe a frog lives down there now, dreaming of snow. You resist the urge to name him. A flicker of torchlight dances across the walls as another worker enters behind you, carrying a small bundle of herbs, mint and hyssop. He's muttering to himself, probably counting inventory. You step aside to let him pass, careful not to disturb whatever delicate order governs this cave of chill. This place isn't just storage, it's ritual. Every layer, every stone, every carved drain was part of a cycle. Gather, store, preserve, delight. Outside, the wind howls briefly and dust pings against the wooden door. It reminds you just how fragile this cold bubble really is. And yet, it lasted for centuries, before refrigerators hummed, before ice trays clinked, before anyone ever said the phrase, walk-in freezer. This was it. As you turn to leave, you cast one last look over your shoulder. The dome seems taller now. The cool seems deeper. Or maybe you're just more awake to the miracle of it. You step back into the sun, blinking, the light blinding. The heat wraps around you like a thick wool blanket left too long near a fire. You instinctively pull your robe tighter despite the temperature. That's how convincing the illusion of cold was. And as you walk away, the yakhchal behind you stands, quietly baking in the sun, keeping its secrets buried under earth and ice and time. You wander through the dusty streets of the ancient city. Perhaps it's Yazd, or Ray, or some smaller outpost stitched into the Persian plateau, like an embroidered detail no one notices until they run their fingers across it. The sun has begun to dip low, and the air now smells of warm clay, distant saffron, and the sharp bite of camel sweat. You follow a group of workers returning from the fields, their robes loose and faded, their sandals trailing thin wisps of powdery earth. The crowd parts briefly, and you spot another yakhchal in the distance. This one older, squat, and partially buried under sand. A goat chews thoughtfully beside it, as if contemplating thermodynamics. Here, preservation wasn't a solitary act. It was a communal rhythm. You pass women drawing water from deep, stone-lined wells, their hands practiced. And sure, nearby an elderly man in russet robes sharpens an iron tool and hums a tune no one's written down in 500 years. You pause, momentarily hypnotized by the glide of his whetstone. To the untrained eye, the city may look parched and spare. But look closer, and you'll see a choreography of survival. A child darts past with a clay cup, splashes of water sloshing out as she giggles. Not a drop is wasted. Even her laughter sounds efficient. In a shady alleyway, two men crouch over a chalk-marked board, playing a game that looks like chess but isn't. Every few minutes, they pause to sip from small ceramic bowls, their contents steaming faintly. Tea? Probably. But in the heat of this place, you wonder. What if it's something cold? You stop at a vendor's cart stacked with glass jars, quince jam, sour cherry preserves, pickled garlic swimming in cloudy brine. These aren't luxuries, they're necessities. Because once you've lived through a desert summer without a yakhchal, you understand that winter isn't a season. It's a gift that must be hoarded and carefully shared. Historians still debate the origins of Persian refrigeration. Was it homegrown genius, or did the idea trickle down from older civilizations, Egyptian, Babylonian, maybe even from as far as the Indus Valley? The truth is, innovation tends to travel like gossip. Everyone adds their own flavor until the original version is just one more whisper in the heat. You find yourself drawn toward a long, low wall. Behind it, a series of shallow pools glisten faintly under the setting sun. These are not for bathing. These are for freezing. Yes, freezing. Because in winter, the desert air drops low enough that water left out overnight will ice over. The Yakhchāls. Persians, ever opportunistic, built long irrigation channels and shallow catchment basins precisely to take advantage of this. You kneel beside one now, tracing the outline with your finger. In the dead of night, workers would come here to ladle the new ice into woven baskets, hoist it over their shoulders, and walk it toward the waiting yakhchāl. Each trip was a moment in a larger ritual of preservation, like temple offerings, but colder and stickier. One worker, perhaps named Arash, might have hated this job. Maybe his hands cracked from the cold. Maybe his back ached from lifting. But he knew that somewhere up in the palace, a princess would awaken in July and taste something impossibly chilled. And she'd sigh. Not knowing his name, of course, but sigh all the same. That was enough. You stand, brushing dust from your knees. A breeze lifts the edge of your robe, and for a moment, you catch the faint scent of rosewater drifting from somewhere nearby. Someone is cooking, or boiling syrup, or perhaps bottling a dessert meant to outlast the summer sun. You head toward the scent and find a small workshop, half open to the air, with copper pots lining the shelves. Inside, a woman stirs a thick, pale liquid with a wooden paddle nearly as tall as she is. She moves slowly, deliberately, humming a lullaby you can't understand but somehow recognize. Her daughter squats nearby, grinding dried petals into powder, with a stone mortar. You watch as she sprinkles the rose powder into the pot. The air fills with a perfume so delicate, you feel as though you should whisper just to keep from disturbing it. This mixture, once chilled, will become something sweet, soft and impossibly cool, a desert sorbet, a frozen custard. Call it what you like. It's magic. Not in the sorcerer's sense, but in the how on earth did they figure this out sense, and yet they did. Over and over again, through wars, sandstorms, dynasties rising, and falling like dough left in the sun. The little girl looks up at you and smiles. You smile back, despite yourself. She doesn't know about thermodynamics, or insulation, or the passive cooling of evaporative architecture. She knows this. When the ice is brought from the yakhchāl, and when it touches the rose milk mixture, it becomes a moment of celebration. You nod in gratitude, and she nods back as if to say, yes, yes, it is a good life, isn't it? You step away quietly, leaving them to their alchemy. The light has dimmed now. Lamps are being lit. Small fires sputter to life. The streets are settling into evening, that thin margin of stillness between scorching heat and desert night, and somewhere nearby, behind a thick domed wall, the cold waits. You drift further into the city, your steps slower now, your breath sinking with the quiet rhythm of twilight. The heat, though ever present, has softened its grip. Shadows lean long across the stone streets. You follow a narrow alley as it bends, and dips, and then opens, surprisingly, into a courtyard paved in glazed turquoise tiles, many of them cracked, some missing entirely. A fig tree leans against the far wall, heavy with fruit not yet ripe, and in its shade sits a man writing slowly with a reed pen. He doesn't look up as you pass, but you can hear the faint scratch of ink on parchment and the occasional mutterings under his breath. You imagine he's cataloging What, exactly? Perhaps temperatures or evaporation rates. Or maybe he's writing a poem about frost, because here, in this city of sand and silence, frost is not a nuisance. It's a miracle. You move along. The architecture closes in again, walls now rising higher and closer together. Above you, latticed. Windows cast honeycomb shadows across the path. You emerge into a larger open space, an urban oasis, a cross between a market and a meeting place. In the center, water trickles along a narrow rill carved directly into the stone. Not fast, barely a murmur, but you feel a surge of envy for that water, meandering so purposefully to a destination known only to gravity and the people who designed this clever system centuries ago. Here, we must pause, because you're now near the qanat. Ah yes, the qanat, the artery of Persian civilization. The cool, slow breath of the desert's underground lungs. It doesn't look like much, just a stone opening near the base of a wall with darkness yawning beyond it. But beneath your feet, a miracle of hydrology stretches for miles. A qanat is not a well, nor is it a tunnel in the dramatic sense. It is a gently sloping underground channel that brings water from distant elevated aquifers to the city. No pumps, no motors, just gradient and gravity and generations of men willing to dig inch by inch, foot by foot, through layers of earth, clay, and stone. You kneel by the opening. The air that emerges is cool, startlingly so. You reach out and let it wash over your fingertips. It's a small act of time travel. This exact air may have begun its journey days ago, at the snowmelt edge of a distant mountain. And now here it is, brushing your skin as if to say, you are not alone in the heat. Some scholars still argue whether the qanat originated here in Persia or earlier in Mesopotamia, but everyone agrees that no one perfected it quite like the Persians. The system was so reliable, it persisted for thousands of years, and in some places still operates today, quietly, invisibly, as dependable as the sunrise. You can't see the entire mechanism, of course, but you imagine it. Shafts dug straight down like organ pipes, spaced precisely, allowing workers to excavate and ventilate the underground passage. Workers like Farid, maybe. A man who spent his entire adult life crawling through darkness, his face smeared with clay, his tools worn smooth by repetition. And why? So that others might drink. So that rice might grow, so that one day in midsummer, a handful of ice could make its way into a syrupy bowl of faloodeh. Above ground, the qanāts, endpoints, sometimes feed into water reservoirs or sards, shaded by trees and cooled by domed roofs. You find one now, round and dark and echoing with drips. A man stands waist-deep in the water, dragging a large net across the surface, not for fish, for leaves. His job is to keep it clear, to preserve the taste, the clarity, the chill. You sit at the edge, legs dangling, and watch as the reflections of the overhead arches ripple and reform. A swallow darts in and out through a carved opening near the dome's crown. Its wings make no sound. The man glances at you, then offers a half-smile. No words are spoken. He gestures to a jug beside him, floating gently. You lift it, find a ceramic cup tucked neatly underneath, and pour. The water is cold, not lukewarm, not pleasantly cool. Cold. You sip, then again, and again. This, right here, is the essence of Persian ingenuity. Not in some abstract academic sense, but in this precise moment where your parched lips meet a drink as crisp as mountain air. You lean back against the warm stone wall and close your eyes. The silence is thick now, pierced only by the distant shouts of children or the rhythmic pad of someone's sandals. You remember the woman with the rosewater custard. You remember the ice pools. You remember the goat chewing beside the yakhchāl, unbothered by the physics at play. You realize you've wandered not just through a city, but through a philosophy, a way of life that bends nature to human need. Not with brute force, but with quiet design. You rise, returning the cup to its place. The man waves, a brief flick of fingers. You nod back, more reverent than you expect. Back in the alley, dusk has melted into full night. Lanterns glow in windows. Somewhere, someone sings a song you don't know but feel like you've always heard. And from beneath the earth, water keeps moving, ice keeps forming, and in the belly of a dome-shaped yakhchāl, deserts sleep. You follow the quiet hum of footsteps now, not your own, but the faded echoes of centuries. Men, women, children threading through the same lanes, bearing copper pitchers, embroidered satchels, delicate trays covered in woven cloth to shield their sweets from the sun. You pass under carved archways and beside crumbling walls warmed by time, brushing fingertips along surfaces smoothed by 1,000 hands. This district is quieter than the others. You notice fewer voices, more rustling. Palms, more cat paws than sandals. Even the wind seems to hush itself here, as though the city were leaning in to listen. Eventually, you find what you weren't looking for, but desperately needed. A small garden tucked between two homes. No grand entrance, no sign, just an open wooden gate, gently creaking, and a carpet of shaded stone. The trees here are old, pomegranate, apricot, a few mulberries, and their branches are bowed like they're whispering secrets to the soil. You sit beside a narrow channel of water, cool and clean, and remove your sandals. The stones beneath are warm, but the water rushing over your feet brings a breath of snowfields long melted. You look up. A boy no older than 10 is threading through the trees, holding something aloft, a small metal bowl. He walks slowly, reverently, the way you might carry a candle on a wind-blown night. He kneels, places it before an older man seated cross-legged beneath the apricot tree. They don't speak, but you know what's inside. The bowl is filled with faloodeh, silken threads of rice starch, swimming in a syrup of sugar and rosewater. Dusted with lime zest and what looks like chopped pistachio. Floating in the center, a jagged piece of ice. It catches the fading sun like a shard of lost winter. You can almost taste it. Somewhere behind you, a donkey brays. A woman calls out, likely to her daughter. A clay jar is lowered into a well with a creak and a splash, and now, as the air settles and the colors deepen, you think again about what's truly impressive here. Not that these people managed to make ice in the desert, that's astonishing, yes, but that they did it quietly, patiently, and artfully. That they honored the water, the wind, and even the shadows. That they built with time, not against it. Historians still debate exactly how cold the yakhchāls could get, or how efficient their insulation was, or who first designed the specific inward bulging curves of the dome. Some say it was trial and error. Others insist on mathematical genius. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in between, somewhere between goat herders and architects, between snowmelt and saffron. But none of that matters now, because you are here. The boy and his grandfather. Yes, you've decided that's who they are. Now share their dessert, slowly, silently. A tiny copper spoon passes between them, careful and rhythmical, and each bite is met with a quiet smile. No rush, no worry, just the gift of cold in a place that should not allow for it. You recline on the stone bench, head resting against a faded cushion someone has left there. Striped, fraying at the edges, but soft and clean. The garden darkens, but only just. A single star appears above the courtyard wall. A breeze brushes your cheek, dry but gentle. And deep beneath your feet, as always, the qanāt runs cold. Word count, 1042. Wind down, 300 words. Now, let your breath slow to match the rhythm of that ancient water. In through your nose, cool, like air drawn from the stone vents of a yakhchāl. Out through your mouth, soft, like a desert breeze slipping past linen curtains at night. The city sleeps now, The lanterns have dimmed, the pots are stacked, and the bowls of faloodeh are licked clean and set aside. There are no footsteps in the alleyways, only the occasional hoot of a nightbird or the rustle of a palm leaf stirred by midnight air. You are warm, but not too warm. Cool at the fingertips, heavy through the limbs, a weightless kind of groundedness, like reclining in the hollow belly of a domed ice house tucked far from the sun's reach. Let your mind settle, like silt in the bottom of a water jar. Let the thoughts come slower, rounder, gentler. You have traveled far tonight, not in distance, but in time. You have walked through the science of shade and the poetry of water. You've seen how patience shapes a civilization and how a spoonful of dessert can carry the memory of mountains. And now, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to move, or think, or try. The story has ended, but the calm remains. So, let yourself float, in cold water, in rosewater, in stillness. Good night.